Hi guys, and welcome back. We brought our F90 M5 to Supersprint, which is in the northern part of Italy, to have the exhaust developed. If you don't know about Supersprint, they started around 1955 and it's still owned by the same family, albeit the second generation of the family members that started the company. So what we're going to do is take you around the factory, show you through the process of making an exhaust, and then hopefully give you an insight as to how an exhaust is designed, developed, and then produced. So let's get into the factory and take you around. So this is where it all begins. When you bring a car to Supersprint for exhaust development, the first thing they will do is put the car on the dyno so they can measure the stock power of the car. This then helps them during the design process because they can make iterations and make prototypes and make sure that the car is making power, or at the very least not losing any power, which we have seen with exhausts that are not developed properly. Now the dyno they use is a Maha dyno, and this is an OEM level dyno, and many manufacturers use the Maha. So this dyno cell is actually pretty cool. It's got some very good features. So this is soundproofed, so it doesn't disturb the rest of the factory. It has very good airflow at the front of the dyno, and they've also built some custom water jets at the front here, and these spray water onto the intercoolers of the cars to keep them cool during the dyno run. They have very good extraction, which means that the exhaust gases will flow out and not get recirculated back into the room and back into the engine. All this provides a solid basis for testing cars to try and keep the parameters the same as possible, which is very important when you're developing a performance part. So moving on, this is Supersprint's R&D department, which houses the exhaust designers. Now they use CAD to design the exhausts. They also houses the fabricators who will create the first prototypes. Currently they have our F90 in this room, and they also have a AMG GTS, which they're just finishing up on. So let's go through here and have a look at what the guys are doing. Now the fabricators are picked from the production line, so as soon as someone's really good at production, then they get the enviable task of creating the prototypes. So they have to make sure the prototypes are completely accurate, and they can change the iterations of the exhaust quickly to make sure that they get quick and good results. So we are going to cover the development process on our F90 in a lot more detail in another video, but this is actually our stock F90 exhaust, which they've made a jig for, and they're currently working on the first prototype. So this is Supersprint's raw material department, and if you're wondering why this is outside, it's because they leave the stainless steel components outside, and if they rust in the rain, then they know the supplier haven't provided them with a good grade. It's obviously very important when you're using stainless steel that it doesn't deteriorate, and this is part of their checking process. Now Supersprint don't just use one or two different diameters of pipe like a lot of other companies would. They specify the diameter of the pipe depending on the application, so they have a wide variety of different diameter pipes here, so they can make something that suits the application rather than using two different diameters and making them fit any car. Right next to this we can see some jigs. Now the jigs are the models that allow Supersprint to repeat the product over and over again. This is just a small selection of what they have, and you'll understand why later. So to make the exhaust you need components. One of the main components in exhaust system is the piping that you saw outside, but obviously that's straight and it has to be formed into shape to be able to make an exhaust fit the car properly. Now the process for that is called mandrel bending, and that takes the pipe and bends it where it needs to be bent, and it actually maintains a radius going through the exhaust pipe. This particular one is the model for the M2 competition. Once they have it modeled up like this, they use a Faro arm to digitize the bends, and then that is transferred onto the bending machine, which we'll go and have a look at, and then that bends the pipe to shape perfectly every time. Firstly, the pipe is taken over to the cutting machine, which cuts the pipe to the correct length. This is then put into the bending machine, which will bend the machine according to the instructions that it's been given. Once this has been completed, they'll put the pipe into the jig just to verify that it has been made correctly. After this, it can go into the component store ready to be welded. So we're walking around and here's more jigs. These are primarily BMW ones, and walking around and taking a look at the plaques, we've actually found the Evolve jig for the Valvetronic exhaust and the X-pipe. So many of you would have had our X-pipe, so every one of those has actually sat on this jig before it's got to you. So it's just, you walk around this place and you see models from the 850i, the V12, you see exhaust they've made for Hartger. It's just steeped in history. It's absolutely amazing. Not only are there literally thousands of jigs, which we showed you outside, there are also variations of those jigs. Now that happens when the part is slightly different. For example, the difference between a D-cat and a sport cat. So these small jigs you see here can be fitted or adapted to the larger jigs to provide those variations. The next room we are in is the main production facility for Supersprint, and this is where all the components are hand welded. As you can see here, currently they're welding rear mufflers and also manifolds for BMW models. This takes a lot of skill, and most of the manifolds are actually TIG welded. If you take a look at some of their collectors, you can see that they use an F1 style merge collector, which is very important for flow when you're making a manifold. So what makes Supersprint exhaust unique is that they're 100% handcrafted in Italy. That means most of the components are actually hand welded, apart from one. Now that is the primaries being welded to the flange, which is done by this machine, which is a robotic welder. This is still hand loaded by an engineer, and after the machine has welded the manifold, it is hand verified to make sure that it's 100% correct. So even with the best fabricators in the world, the work still needs to be verified. So after production, the next step is quality control. Now these guys make sure that the exhaust or manifold product, which is coming from production, is made to Supersprint's existing standard. From here, once it's been verified, it can go into the stock room or get ready for packing to be shipped out. As you've seen, there's lots of jigs dotted around the factory, and these are ones that they're still actively using. Now this is what I term the jig graveyard. So this is all the old jigs that are not really being used anymore, but if there was demand, Supersprint could actually pull these jigs out and make exhaust from it. Over here we've got loads of old BMW tuner jigs. You've got ones from Hartger, from Hamann, the list goes on. I mean, Supersprint have been making exhaust for German tuners for years, including people like Carlson as well. So they've got a really rich heritage in making exhaust, especially for German cars, and not just that, just for models from Alfa Romeo all the way to the other end of the spectrum. So I mean, it's amazing how they've kept all of these jigs here, and if they wanted to, they could just produce those exhausts if there was demand for it. It's absolutely nuts. As you saw from outside, Supersprint have got a vast catalogue of jigs. So when I've come back inside, I've had to ask for an old catalogue to see if we can have a look at some of the older products. Now they've got products going back to 1965 in this, and it's a very unique position that Supersprint in, because most companies would discontinue the exhaust and they'd never be able to make it again. But Supersprint have the ability, if there was demand, for example, for 10 of a 3000 CSI exhaust, they could actually make it. If you have a look at this catalogue, it's such an early one that they weren't even using photographs. It's literally just diagrams. I mean, they've got manifolds going back to the 320i, the original one, and the two 1800 CS and a 3000 CS. It's absolutely nuts the amount of jigs they have and what they could actually produce if they wanted to. I mean, there's Datsun's 240Zs in here. It's ridiculous. They've got something from a specific one for America here as well. These are the only ones they have as well, so I've been told to be very careful. I've actually got Supersprint history in my hand here. Old Mercedes systems, the original SL. I've got original Porsche 914, 911T. And it's crazy to think that if, for example, Porsche Owners Club wanted 10 of these exhausts made, they could actually produce them because they still have the jigs for it. So, I mean, this is one of the reasons why we do partner with Supersprint on a lot of our products, and especially the manifolds. They have a lot of expertise, a lot of history. Everything's made in-house, and we know that when we buy our Evolve V10 headers, for example, that they're going to fit and we're not going to have any issues with it. We've sold hundreds of those manifolds and we've not had one issue with fitment on them, which is testament to the skill that they have in this company. So we're back in the R&D department where we started, and that concludes our tour of the Supersprint factory. I hope it's been useful for you guys and it's given you insight into this historic exhaust manufacturer. As I mentioned previously, our F90 M5 is here for exhaust development, and we are going to do a separate video on that. If that's been released already, it'll be over here. If it's not, I'm putting at nothing. It's time for us to head home now. I'd like to thank Supersprint for their hospitality, and me and Matt will be back in 2 weeks to pick the car up once the exhaust is done. Thank you for watching, guys. If you want to watch more of our videos, you can watch them over here. If you want to watch what YouTube suggests that you might like from our videos, you can watch them over here. As always, if you haven't already, please like our video and subscribe to our channel. If you've got any questions for us, please drop them in the comments below and we'll do our best to answer them for you.